Hey ya, this is Sydney with Let's Get Through It Astrology. I'm here to take you through the astrological weather day by day for a bit of play-by-play. My intention is to give you a little bit of a vibe check so that you can show up on planet Earth as your very best self. I'm recording this from beautiful and sunny Oakland, California, so note that all of the times mentioned in this podcast are in Pacific Standard Time, so you'll want to adjust for wherever you are in the world. Okay, let's get through it. Hey, welcome back. As a reminder, I talk about the time of Wednesday through Tuesday. It's just what my recording schedule allows. We have another big week leading into some extraordinary astrology for the rest of the year. And as you know, we just had Neptune going into Aries yesterday. So we are in a whole new world, everybody. And in a lot of ways, I think it's really buckle up for especially the next couple of years as we have some of our biggest players, the biggest transpersonal planets making some fairly big aspects. We are going to be expecting that Saturn-Neptune conjunction happening in February, so we're going to get some buildup for that. The erosion of structures, the new vision of structures as well, and just a little bee in our bonnet, we need to remember that Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries is going to be happening at the IC, the fourth house cusp of America's chart, really talking about the erosion of old structures and a whole new world. There's no turning back. Okay. So for this week in particular, we'll talk about what to watch out for. Uranus is stationing to go direct, so very, very slow, won't move more than 1 minute this whole week getting it to its station. So when we have Uranus stationing, all themes around Uranus become very, very strong, very, very potent, and this is going to be running in the background for the whole week, and so we mustn't forget that. Uranus, in particular, is a planet that is associated with its eccentricity. There is themes of breakthroughs, earthquakes, electricity, revolutions, change, chaos, inventions, deviations, anything having to do with craft, especially flight. So anything having to do with flights being grounded, weird flight things happening, we know that is a potential, especially for this week. Everything having to do with earthquakes. In fact, when Uranus first entered Taurus, which was May 15th, 2018, so many years ago, right? That's 8 years ago now. There was a major earthquake that did happen. I would have to look back on my notes as to where that was, but let's just keep moving forward. You can also look it up. Google is apparently free. Uranus is also the planet of rebelliousness, unpredictability, genius, extremism, futurism, and sudden change. Also anarchy, something to keep in mind, but I think we just need to think about everything being sudden, a sudden shift, a quake in the foundations that we consider to be real. Uranus is in Taurus, which is an earth sign, so everything having to do with earthquakes makes sense for me here. Taurus is also a planet that has to do with money, currency. It also has to do with value, love, right? Things around security. And I think also because we have this going on, anything that we really thought were foundations that were secure, especially having to do with money and finances, are up for a bit of a wobble for this week. So hang on to your hats. Super fun being alive right now, you know? The moon is going to be out of bounds until Saturday, January 31st. We're going to have the moon going from Gemini to Virgo. So it's going to go Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and then Virgo. We're going to get a full moon at 13 degrees Leo on February 1st, which is Sunday. Little minor aspect that I think could be really cute is we are going to have a conjunction between Mercury and Venus on the 29th, which is good for negotiations. It's good for contracts, things where you need to have some sort of conversation, maybe about money, currency, relationships, those sort of things. Also good for socializing if you're going outside, right? And February 2nd, we're going to have Mercury sextile Chiron, which is a potentiality for conversations of healing and wisdom. So we also like that too. Okay. We're going to go through the week. I'm going to try to be as succinct and as brief as I can, focusing mostly on the major aspects, though I do use quincunxes and sesqui-squares because I do find them poignant, interesting, frustrating, and sometimes they change the course of direction for us. On the screen, I do have our first day that we're going to be talking about. So let's get into it. January 28th is Wednesday. Wednesday is Mercury's day, and we have Mercury still under the beams, about to leave combustion of the sun at 13 degrees Aquarius. I personally think that Mercury really likes being in Aquarius because it's, this like genius thought and ideas of newness and for the future, though it is in a fixed sign, which can speak to ideas that are not only strange, but also might have some extremism to it. Aquarius is a sign that some people will associate to utopianism, but on the other side of that is extremism. So we can't forget that there's kind of two sides of this coin. Future thought, things having to do with future plans and future structures, community also is a very Aquarian thing. There's also this idea of like being the lone wolf inside of society, caring about what's going on with community, but also feeling set aside, right? The significations for Aquarius in evolutionary astrology has to do with trauma. And I think we are dealing with a lot of trauma collectively right now as we are watching what is happening to our communities all over the world. We can't forget that we are a part of a global community and not just a neighborhood or nationwide one. So, ideas of communication, contracts, negotiations, sales, anything having to do with thought are all things that could be coming up on Mercury's day. And early in the day, we have some nice working trines from the moon in Gemini, and the moon in Gemini really loves data. It wants to communicate, it wants to externally process. And so it's pretty chatty, right? It has a trine to the sun, which is nice. This is a flowing energy, how we are and what we're thinking are in alignment. We're working with those things. And it's in air signs. So we have to always be thinking about communication and thought processing, thinking at this time. We have the moon trine Mercury. That'll happen right around noon. This is a really nice working aspect to be able to have communications about how we're doing, how we're feeling, what's going on, how we want to show up. And we have a trine to Venus, which will be happening just after that, which is also a pretty feel-good moment and just kind of take a breath collectively. How do we want to show up in community and to bring a little bit of sweetness to the places that we need to, right? This can also be themes around like social care with Venus and Aquarius, with that moon trine to it. Later on in the evening, the last aspects of the day are going to be the moon sesqui-squaring Pluto and Mars. So this brings up frustrations and power control dynamics that we can't necessarily completely work through. And so we're going to be cautious about how we're expressing our energy at this time. It could be a time where we're feeling really irritated or angry, and we're going to make sure to not explode. Considering that we are still within this energy of the Mars-Pluto conjunction, there could be some things that really come up around violence and conflict on this day. But in your interpersonal, your inner life, right, your individual life, if you can use those working aspects earlier on in the day to get what you need done, hopefully that will kind of set you at a good equilibrium before we get into the crankiness that comes in the evening. Thursday, January 29th, is Jupiter's day. We still have Jupiter in Cancer. This is exalted. He is retrograde. I think we're a few weeks out from Jupiter finally going direct. But Jupiter days are good for higher learning, wisdom, travel, though I would not suggest really any travel this week with Uranus's station. So that's kind of take what you can. This can also be around like inner emotional travel that we need to do in order for us to expand and feel more compassionate and caring and giving and secure internally.
So on this day, we do get very early in the morning, we're going to get that Mercury conjunct Venus. This is good for negotiations, having conversations that have to do with potentially trade and money. This can be a nice little social aspect as well, and social as in like working inside of our communities, right? Community care, having the sort of meetings that we have to do in order to show up for community, certainly. We're going to get the moon sextile Chiron. This is a nice healing energy, also very, very early in the morning, 2:53 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then we're going to go into the cranky parts, right? 5:44 a.m., kind of when the world is waking up, at least on the West Coast. We're going to have the moon sesqui-square the sun. This is just probably just feeling pretty irritated, out of sorts, not really knowing how to move forward, a bit frustrated and trying to make things in alignment. And we're going to have a bit of a depressing square of the moon square Saturn, which could mean that we feel like we have a lot on our shoulders. We have a lot to do. And certainly looking around, that's like really no shit, Sherlock, right? We could be feeling blocked in how we want to move forward because we've kind of hit a wall here. So take a time. I think this is a time to really exercise patience and calm and kind of taking stock of everything that is around us to do and just take a beat because we are going to get a vibe shift at 2:31 p.m., right? We're going to get the moon going to Cancer, loves being in Cancer. And this is a nice moon that is really feeling about security and safety and comfort. When we have the moon going into Cancer, it now becomes a very much doing moon, right? It's a cardinal sign, so it really wants to go out and secure itself, right? It's not going to sit around and think, oh, well, what do I need to do in order to get myself feeling more safe and secure? It says, no, I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to go find it. I'm going to try to get that for myself, right? Afternoon, the moon is going to make a slew of frustrating aspects. Moon square Neptune, moon sesqui-square Venus, moon sesqui-square Mercury, quincunx Pluto, quincunx Mars. So now we're in these uncomfortable, confusing, frustrating energy that for me says the moon is going to say, I need to make some adjustments around maybe how I've been expressing my anger and frustration, right? That Pluto Mars is still within this very powerful conjunction. It is separating, but the moon can kind of shake that up, right? When we have the moon sesqui-square Venus and Mercury, and those two planets have just made their conjunction, I'm wondering if there is some sort of frustration around the agreements that we've made, and we're like, oh, wait, there's something else here that needs to be emotionally processed here. So just watch out for the frustration that can come on later in the day, and also try not to act out too rash or engage yourself in any sort of power and control dynamics that you can't really fully flesh out on this day. Moving forward into January 30th, which is Friday. Friday is Venus's day. We have Venus in Aquarius, the love of community, right? The love of things that are eccentric or strange or weird. Connecting in a cerebral, more genius level around the things that we care about and love. I really think of Venus in Aquarius as community care and being like the social butterfly, right? So on Venus days, we're going to try to engage with things that we consider to be beautiful and try to find some sort of pleasure and maybe calm from all of the things that are happening in this world. And we still have Mars and Pluto very close together, so we're going to be careful of things that have to do with violence, things coming up around violent actions that are happening in the world. These are just really, really strange times to be traversing. We have quincunxes today, a lot of quincunxes. In the morning, we're going to have moon quincunx sun, so feeling anxious, irritable, not necessarily knowing which way we want to go in order to create security for ourselves and just try to sit within the discomfort so that we can make any sort of emotional adjustments that we need to make. We're going to have Mercury quincunx Jupiter, which there's like a disharmony between right brain and left brain thought, right? Between communication and maybe some higher learning. This could bring up some issues in law and legalities. You said this, but it really is supposed to be this. Certainly, we're having a lot of that around the Constitution and the various laws that have been passed or not been even honored, right? So there's that. We're going to get moon quincunx Venus, and that's going to be later on in the day, but we have to remember that the moon travels fast, so this aspect is forming, which could bring up some issues in relationships, money, currency, our values. And again, we could just be feeling very discombobulated inside of our romantic relationships or even inside of how we want to operate in community. Sandwiched kind of in the middle of all of this, we have the moon conjuncting Jupiter, which says that there's kind of a more aspect to it. This should be a pleasant aspect, right? Moon conjunct Jupiter, this emotional expansion. And maybe this is like an internal emotional expansion with that retrograde Jupiter in Cancer. It also says more to me. It just says more. There's more feeling here. And considering that the moon is out of bounds, I think we're feeling a lot. So letting ourselves emotionally release any of the frustrations that come up is really, really good. But we're going to be cautious because we're also going to get that moon quincunx Mercury, which is going to happen at last aspect of the night, 8:14 p.m. Conversations aren't flowing. The conversations could be frustrating, being asked to emotionally adjust to what is being presented to us in information and conversations that we're having with other people. So, kind of try to let things simmer and try not to overreact to what is being presented to you and say to yourself, can I make the internal emotional adjustment to be okay with this thing, or do we need to come back to it another day? Saturday, January 31st, we're gonna get, I don't know. I feel like this day, you have the opportunity to get some things done, and we really like that. Saturday is Saturn's day. I like Saturn days for ticking off the things that create the structures around us, doing the things on the honey-do list, on the to-do list that helps us maintain our reality. Yeah, sensitive things could arise. 4:27 a.m. moon square Chiron. This could be around identity issues and feeling safe in how we're expressing ourselves or, experiencing sensitivity around a hurt that was given to you. Maybe you have a bad dream and you wake up and you look at your partner and you're like, I can't believe we broke up in our dream, and they're like, whoa. And maybe that brings up something. So just sit through. Try to get emotionally right with what you're experiencing. Say, it's okay for me to feel sensitive and be aware of how you're expressing yourself, especially if you wake up super early. You could just be feeling cranky. Have a cup of tea. We're going to get the moon sextile Uranus, which is stationing, which I think is going to kind of ping that moment. We could be making sudden emotional adjustments and seeing things in a new way, feeling things in a new way. We could just have a little bit of emotional shock here. It's a flowing aspect, so I don't really expect it to be jarring. We have other things that are pretty jarring in the world. We do have Mars and Pluto are almost outside of the 3-degree range on this day. So hopefully the height of violence and conflict and strife is passing for this time period. Fingers crossed. We're going to get the moon trine Saturn, 1:51 p.m. This is such a nice working trine to get things done, to diligently and patiently work on the things that you want to work on, maybe feeling, hopefully, a bit more emotionally stable and calm. I think, especially because Saturn is still in Pisces, this is a good moment to take a breath, sit down, meditate, and get really clear about what you are emotionally dealing with, figure out what's yours, what's not, that sort of thing. At 4:08 p.m., we're going to get the moon ingressing, entering into Leo. And now we have a playful, creative moon. It is in the sign of the child. It is a sign that it's like a need for loyalty, a need for sharing love, being open-hearted. This is like a childlike moon. We need to be shown love here, right? And we also need to remember that with the moon entering Leo, we are now inside of the moon that is going to have a full moon in the next day. So now we're here, right? And those full moon feelings, I think, are going to be building. So we could start feeling a little bit more irritated, a little bit more frustrated. There could be anxious feelings arising at this time. You know, full moons are a time of awareness, also can be a time of conflict because we have the moon across from the sun, right? And things could be coming up at this time or starting to reveal themselves and come to light. But we have to remember that the full moon isn't tomorrow, but it is starting to happen, right? At the very, let's see, yeah, 4:23 p.m., moon trine Neptune. This is, I think, a really lovely creative aspect. We have the moon in Leo, trine this very new to us, Neptune in Aries, and it's in fire signs. So this is, passionate, dreamy, intuitive energy. We could be feeling like the spark of creativity. And so if you are feeling pulled to being creative in the afternoon, roll with it, go with it. There's a dreaminess that can come here. Last aspect of the day, end of the day, we have moon opposite Pluto. And this, I think, could also wake up some of the Mars-Pluto strife, conflict, anger, energy. And with moon opposite Pluto, this can cause powerful emotional outbursts, right? And this could have to do with ego clash, creativity clash, identity clash, you know, potentially not feeling like you're being cared for and honored in the ways that you want to. And now you are feeling some sort of way about it, right? With Moon Pluto, this is just powerful emotions can arise, and we need to find good, healthy containers from which to deal with those things. Try to use that Moon trine Neptune to be creative with the energy that comes up at the end of the day. You could be asleep at the end of the day, at 10:21 when this aspect fully forms, but we need to remember that the moon is going to be applying into this Pluto, so the tensions could be rising as we get into the evening. I don't necessarily feel like I would want to be out partying, especially with that moon trine Neptune. There could be some indulgence in drugs and alcohol that could be happening, which will then, with the moon opposite Pluto, create some conflict and some issues. Some emotional power and control dynamics can come up. And certainly, if you've ever been to a bar and you've ever seen anybody drink too much and then get into a conversation with someone that turns into a fight, it seems like that's how that could potentially play out. February 1st, we are going into the full moon, and so I want to talk about the full moon. All right, so we had a full moon in Leo. Sunday is the sun's day, and we're at a awareness point. Full moons bring things to light, to a culmination. We could be feeling, I think, pretty raw. Things could come up that have to do with children, with the moon in Leo, Leo being a sign for children, for creativity, for youth. And also, I think about like royalty. The moon is going up against, here, let me put on the full moon chart. Here's the full moon chart. 2:09 p.m. is when we're going to get the full moon. Okay. And we are, I think now this pretty much triggers us going into eclipse season, because we are going to have an eclipse later, February 17th, I believe, in Aquarius, a new moon in Aquarius eclipse. So there's that. Welcome to eclipse season, first and foremost. So the full moon at 13 Leo is in Jupiter's bound. And something that I was kind of musing over is this is a bound of Jupiter, which can also be like empire and like king, regality, religion, spirituality. So things could be coming up about that at this time. This also is like the king against the people, right? Leo, the king of the jungle, the king against the people. Aquarius, which is this stellium. There's so much Aquarian energy in the sky, right? The moon is in the 11th mansion. I love the mansions of the moon. Here's the book by Christopher Warnock. It's quite lovely. If you're into magic and you do elections, the mansions are really good to check in with before you start doing any spell work. But just as an aside, so the moon is in the 11th mansion, which is also called the main. Al Zubra. I probably butchered that. It is an Arabic name. And it can represent righteous assertion of authority, not mindless or petty aggression. This is not the time to shrink from confrontation or hide in fear. This is from Christopher Warnock's book. So this could be some, this culmination of like the people rising up and saying, hey, this isn't right, going against the king, right? And this could also be, with the moon in Leo, like people showing up with their open heartedness and saying like, no, we have to come together as a community. There's a lot going on in the world, right? It's so much. It's so much. The sun, which, we pay attention to the mansion of the moon, but I wanted to look. The sun is in the 25th mansion, which is called the Star of Dungeons, or Al-Dad al-Abiyah. So this mansion advises that we proceed according to the dictates of nature rather than those of men, machines, or artifice. And I think of this as like natural law. This is the awareness of like, hey, this is what's right, not what men have written on papers and then perverted over the very many years of subjugating other people to terror, right? This is what's right, and we are going to rise up. We are going to make everybody aware of what is going on. An interesting note about this full moon is that this full moon is ruled by that sun in Aquarius that has to do with community. It has to do with the collective. It has to do with trauma. It has to do with freedom, liberation, and also extremism. There could be something coming up, especially because we do have the moon Pluto in play with this full moon, right? That is the awareness of just how far from the utopian path that was created. I say that with air quotes, utopian, because it was not utopian for many of us, right? That brings up and wakes up anger and hurt and strife. Venus and Mercury are quincunx Jupiter. So Venus and Mercury are being asked to adjust something in terms of, maybe how we're thinking and how we're offering care in regards to, legalities, higher wisdom. Jupiter is also natural law. So making these adjustments, so like, actually, this is right. And this is how it should be, is in play here. And I think because of that quincunx with Venus and Mercury operating here, this is a nervous full moon. There's a lot of, in Aquarius, right? If you want to say that it's ruled by Uranus, there's some electricity happening here in the sky. We do have Venus and Mercury in this applying square to Uranus, which is stationed. So I think that this is a kind of a frenetic, liberatory, very eccentric full moon that feels like we're all on pins and needles looking at what has been revealed to us. The moon during the full moon is already in the middle of making all these oppositions, right? And opposition is like open enemy conflict. So, and the moon is really traversing some dangerous territory, just like leading open hearted, like, I'm going to do it, and coming up against Pluto before this full moon and Mars, which is definitely angry, and then coming into the sun. Then it's going to meet up with Venus that can bring up some relationship issues, and Mercury, which is, communication issues. So I think that this is a very, very juicy full moon. We're going to want to be paying attention to if you have any placements in the fixed signs that are, I would say, within that 6 degrees. So I would say 10 Aquarius to 16 Aquarius, and maybe even a little wider than that in the fixed signs. So you got Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. This could be bringing things up. And if you have any of your points, right, your ascendant, midheaven, descendant, or your IC around those degrees, this could be themes that are more prominent, something coming up to light, and you're like, oh, I got to deal with this now. So keep that in mind for your own chart. And if you don't know where that is or what's going on with your own chart, I'm here. I do readings. So do a lot of astrologers. And we are here for you to traverse all of this stuff. If there's anything else I want to say about this moon, yeah, there's a tremendous amount of fire and air in the sky. So this is about instinct, action, and ideas. Be very, very fascinating to see what comes up on this full moon. For any sort of ritual, we're going to release on this day, right? This is this day and the next couple of days as the moon starts to wane. What do you want to release that has to do with maybe ego, maybe with creativity? Maybe you're putting something out there into the world. Maybe you need to start something new, but you can't do that without letting something go. Do ritual to let it go on this day. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's move forward. February 2nd is Monday. Monday is the moon's day. We're going to have the moon going into Virgo later on in the day, but we start with the moon in Leo, having just done its big full moon reveal with the sun yesterday. So we're still in full moon energies, right? Revealing, awareness, culmination, things coming to light for us to deal with, push forward, to release, to handle, right? On this day, especially on this day, we're going to get some more oppositions. Love that for us. Moon opposite Venus, we're potentially going to be coming up against or being aware of some financial or relationship conflict that needs to be resolved or dealt with, or we're just aware of it so that we can move accordingly. Right? Maybe we need to release something in how we are acting inside of relationships. Moon opposite Mercury, that's going to happen at 5:55 a.m. This could be verbal sparring, verbal conflict, conflict coming up in some of the agreements that maybe you had earlier with that Venus-Mercury conjunction that happened a few days back. Just be cautious about how you're expressing any of your frustrations or anger or curiosities, certainly. We are going to get Moon trine Chiron at 7:15 a.m., which is this opportunity to do some emotional healing and to work inside of being an empathetic person, using our empathy to connect with other people. And so I'm hoping that that's a little bit of a mitigation after the oppositions from the moon to Venus and Mercury. Something comes up and now we're like, oh, actually, I get this. I can see these points of view. I can see where I'm coming from, where I'm working from with my hurt. Let's move forward, right? 2:55 p.m., we're going to get the moon square Uranus, remembering that Uranus is stationing to go direct. So this could be a potentially shocking square, right? This could be a sudden emotional shift, a sudden emotional shock. This could be all of a sudden feeling quite rebellious, quite revolutionary, wanting to do something about it. We have to remember that the squares have this energy of Mars. Do it, right? Aggression. So something could be coming up too that will just really shake up whatever that Uranus station is going to be about. Certainly could have something to do with Uranus being in Taurus, financial, could also have to do with the arts, maybe. Yeah, maybe the arts, something about culture. So maybe like a bit of a culture shock. At 4:32 p.m., we're going to get the Mercury sextile Chiron. This can be a healing time and a mentally healing time. This can bring, uh, now we are speaking using that trine from the moon to Chiron, and now we have this sextile to Chiron to maybe speak about the ways that we want to either heal ourselves, be healing to other people, show up for other people, offer empathy and care. So, there's it feels like ideas and conversations more than really like emotional integration. Moon, quincunx Saturn, 5:20 p.m., anxiety. Anxiety, feeling the blues, feeling like frustrated about everything that we have to get done, maybe even frustrated with literally everything out there. Um, the anxiety could be running high. And we get at 7:21 p.m. the moon going into Virgo, which can be a nervous moon. And from there, the moon is going to make a quincunx to Neptune, which could have us being emotional foggy, right? The moon in Virgo, now quincunx, the Neptune in Aries. We need to make some sort of maybe emotional shift around what we're trying to do or get done that is in alignment with this new dream that we are envisioning with the Neptune in Aries. But we have to remember that, Neptune is wanting the moon to adjust. And it's a new adjustment. We don't know. And I think that this brings up even more confusion and anxiety. The nice thing about a moon in Virgo is that a moon in Virgo wants to get things done. It wants to get its hands dirty, to be of service. A moon in Virgo is about, it has emotional systems to get things done and to work things out. It needs to analyze things to know where it's at. And until it gets through these quincunxes, I don't think it's really going to understand everything that it needs to do. So later on in the day, on this day, we're just going to analyze and whittle out the things that aren't ours, that aren't emotionally ours, the confusion. We're going to go, okay, I'm feeling confused. How can I get inside of my nervous system to like really discern, right? That's a good word for Virgo. Discern what is mine, what is not mine, and to try to release that or to make the emotional adjustments I need to make so that I can move on. Moving forward into Tuesday, February 3rd is Mars's day. Mars is now hopefully outside of the danger zone of being conjunct to Pluto, but we still have, a lot of Aquarius energy in the sky, which just taking in everything, I do think it has to do with, these extreme ideas, we're really dealing with like the ideas of black and white, right? There's not a lot of nuance happening. And I really think that we need to get more creative about how we all want to show up and organize and come together and revolutionize. This day is Uranus's station. This is when it goes direct or stations direct, right? So it's still very slow. Everything having to do with Uranus has been important this whole week. Will be for a few days after, right? But Uranus, this is eccentricity, this is breakthroughs, this is earthquakes, this is revolutions, this is change, this is chaos, this is inventions, deviations, stuff with flight and travel, I think, could really rear its head on this day, particularly because we have Mercury, which can be, this is like short distance travel, approaching a square very close, within 3 degrees, so I think it's important to mention, to Uranus, which is all sorts of like aviation. I would not be surprised if there were like groundings, like flight groundings or anything having to do with flights on this day, or transportation, car accidents, all of that stuff. So all that being said, be very careful on the roads. Be very careful in, if you have to fly. This could be just disruptions in communications, outages of communication, phones, internet, all of that could be happening as well. We don't have a lot of aspects today, and in fact, we do not have any major aspects of the moon to any of the planets, but we do have this just like quincunx, sesqui-square, quincunx. With Uranus station, it says anxiety. It says frustration. It says to me this electricity in the sky. And when we have that sort of nervousness, we have the danger of acting erratically and in ways that are not good for us or other people. So this day, I mean, all of the days of this week, but this day, I really think that we have to be very, very careful here.
Hey, thank you for listening to today's Astro Weather with me. I'm Sydney. As a reminder, I'm always open to seeing both new and my beloved returning clients. My website is ddastrology.com. That is D as in dog, astrology.com to check me out, and just click the email buttons in order to schedule with me. If you're into a more conversational feel with your podcast and content, I have a podcast called BS Astrology with my fellow Mercurial Mommy Bender, and we put out episodes every Sunday for the week. Just search BS Astrology on YouTube or wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts, including Spotify, Audible, and more. Have a good day.